Hello, my love. Welcome to the second episode of Radical Radiance. This is a funny one because if I had known I was going to be recording this even 6 months ago, I would have laughed in my own face. But this episode is all about the life-shattering, earth-shattering discovery, for me, of walking slowly. And it sounds like the most basic, the most mundane, the most boring, irrelevant thing you could possibly imagine. And don't worry, that was exactly my reaction too. That's always been my reaction. But something happened that changed everything for me. And so I'm just going to share it with you here in the off chance that it could even encourage one of you to explore this in your own body and just see what happens. It took a long time for me to learn this lesson, so I'm always wanting to share anything that could help any of you learn anything faster, optimize anything faster, experience a more beautiful life faster. And as I'm saying this is so ironic because it's even against the whole point of what I'm saying. Maybe faster is not the right word. Maybe it's about learning the lesson more elegantly, or not having to spend so much time repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Because of course, as we know, that is the definition of insanity. That's what I was doing for most of my life. So if we start at the start, I have always been a very fast-paced person in general in my life, I would say. I was I'm the eldest of 4 children, so I've got big older sister vibes. I've always been a very insatiably curious child with a lot of energy, a lot of energy, always running around here and there, always exploring things, always reading, always doing things, never sitting still, never ever sitting still. And then also, of course, like in my life as well, in my late teens, my early 20s, life was jam-packed full. Every single spare minute that I wasn't studying or working was full of something. Relentless socializing. Once I discovered my true extroverted nature, I would say, or maybe right after I got over being so shy, after being bullied for so long and like becoming quite, not introverted, but like closed in on myself maybe. And then luckily life brought me lots of beautiful experiences to become more sociable, more outgoing. And I really then like went full gas into full extroversion. Every single spare minute of my time was spent socializing. Every single night of the week, I was out for dinner with a different person, doing different things, rock climbing, salsa dancing, all kinds of different activities, all kinds of different types of socializing, running from here to there, here to there, here to there, constantly. And of course, then traveling a lot in my 20s as well, and just soaking up all of the experiences that I possibly could, but at a very fast rate. And I was also doing lots of other different types of movement practices and exploring those kind of things. I moved abroad, was living life overseas, and then again moved back to Melbourne in my early 30s. And then it became even more relentless at this point, which is even wild in some ways, I think. Like just I was working full-time but in multiple jobs. I was also working in my own art business on the side, running my art business. I was again socializing relentlessly. I was studying interior decoration. I was also just doing lots of different movement practices at this time, exploring lots of different things. And it was something that I prided myself on, really, the fact that I could live at this pace. And I was doing just it was like, looking back now, there's a lot of things that I can see in hindsight that I just couldn't see at that moment. So I would wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I would like quickly do a meditation and then go to the cafe, be on my laptop doing like my own business in the morning at the cafe, doing art things, website things, orders, all of those kind of things. Then I would go to work. I would work. On my lunch break, I'd try and squeeze in a workout or a walk. And then after work, I'd go straight from there to go for a run with a friend, straight from there to go for dinner with another friend, straight from there to come back to go grocery shopping or whatever errands I had to run, come back home, do some assignments for my study that I was doing, any other like home errands that needed to be done, washing, all of that kind of thing. And then get into bed just completely exhausted and had no idea why I was suffering from just complete insomnia in my early 30s. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I would stay awake the whole night, lying awake, and then repeat it all again the next day. But still somehow prided myself so much on this relentless pace of my life. And not even that I prided myself on it, but it just didn't make sense to live in any other way. that I was like, why would I want to do things more slowly when I could do things more quickly? And why would I want to fit less into my life when I could actually just fit more into my life? And why would I want to do less if I could do more, you know? It just didn't make sense in my mind. Why would I do less? Why would I want to see less people? Why would I want to have less activities? I love all my activities. I love all this socializing. I love all this studying. I love all of these things. Like, what would I possibly get rid of? In fact, I want to add even more. I want to read more. I want to do more things. I want to have more hobbies. I want to see more people. I want to make new friends. And at some point, it never made a connection in my mind of like, you can't sleep. Like, there's obviously a big problem happening here. And in my body, it felt like just this, like being a very tightly coiled spring. Like really like, but I didn't know any different. Yeah, it was just normal. There was also COVID. There was lots of other things happening around that, in that time, in those years. I just had an enormous breakup of my 20s and had to move back to Australia from Spain, which I never expected to happen. There was a lot of, I really like fully had the rug pulled out from underneath me in these years. And I was rebuilding all of this, relearning who I am, exploring a lot of different things and enjoying all of that. And then just never making the connection that living at this pace has a cost, a very big cost, in fact. But I enjoyed it. I loved all of the things I was doing, and I loved that it was at a fast pace, and I was impatient in my life, and I was moving very, very quickly. And of course, I was moving very quickly from place to place. I was impatient in traffic. I hated driving in traffic. I was impatient walking. I would get irritated if the people in the supermarket were walking in front of me slow, if the people in the street were walking in front of me slowly. Everywhere I walked at top speed. And actually, I remember being in high school and getting like exploring running and then also exploring power walking as a form of exercise. And I'd go on these really big, long power walks, and I got very fascinated with that. And I feel like that's where I built that pattern and then just never broke it again. So I was going at a very, 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 very fast pace. And I was also habit stacking everything. Everything was stacked. And I had all of these like wonderful different habits for nervous system regulation and these meditations and breathing exercises. And I'd started working out every day and all of these different things, and EFT tapping I was doing, and hypnosis, self-hypnosis, all of these things, but they were all stacked. And I would be like rushing to work early so I could have 10 minutes spare in my car before work quickly so I could quickly do some EFT tapping so I could quickly get to work, or I would just, I was doing all of these things. And I was like, why aren't they working? I mean, they kind of worked, I guess. They were interesting things to explore. They kept me probably more regulated than I would have been without them. But I was like, oh, why do I not feel just like completely calm? Like there's still this tension in my body, but in fact, I was too busy to even notice it. I didn't even really notice how tense I was because it was just completely normal. I didn't know what life felt like not at that pace. I didn't know what my body felt like not at that pace. I didn't know what my mind felt like not at that pace. Then fast forward a little bit and I moved abroad. I traveled around for a year in Indonesia and Thailand, came back to Melbourne for a bit, left again on a one-way flight to Sri Lanka. Again, did a bit more traveling. I was in Sri Lanka, went to Europe, came back to Sri Lanka, and then just settled there. And from that moment, things started to slow down for me, just because I was living in a very, very, very small town, in a very, very calm place. There was not much going on there, just people surfing, a beautiful community of other really inspiring women doing interesting things. I spent a lot of time at the beach. I spent a lot of time in the sun. I spent a lot of time walking. And from the outside, it looked very, very, very peaceful, very relaxed. But on the inside, I still had this relentless schedule for myself. I was still doing everything so quickly, and every moment had to be optimized. Even when I was laying in the sun, even if I was laying in the sun the whole afternoon, it had to be productive. I had to be reading a book about neuroscience or longevity, or reading about metabolic health and how to optimize it, and taking notes and listening to this podcast and reading all these books and consolidating everything, synthesizing everything, and loving it. Of course, that's one of my biggest passions in my life. But it was never restful. And I still had this not ridiculous, but kind of ridiculous schedule for myself. And I would wake up early. Quickly wake up at 5 and do your meditation and quickly clean your room. You have to start Kalari at 6, do your Kalari, quickly get changed, quickly go for a run, finish the run, come back, get changed, quickly have a shower, go to the cafe so you can be at the cafe when it opens at 8, and then what for? I don't know why that was such an arbitrary time. Sit in the cafe, do your work, create content, post on social media, do your client work, client calls, interior design work, whatever it was. making concept boards, making vision boards, talking to people, all of these different things, and then quickly go home, have your lunch, do your other things. I was doing TikTok lives while I was having lunch, making lunch, then go to the beach, quickly go to the beach, settle down there, read all these books, read all your books. Okay, now it's time for your afternoon walk. Let's go on the walk. And the walk was, of course, very, very, very fast paced, very fast. I was infamous in town for being just like this crazy redheaded girl that walked everywhere and was always speaking into her phone. I was always replying to client voice notes, replying to voice notes from my friends, listening to podcasts, listening to an audiobook of a book I was reading, and then quickly come home so quickly then you can make your dinner, and then finally you can be in bed by 8 o'clock, and then it's time to relax and you can read your fantasy book, whatever fantasy series I was reading in any given moment. And I lived like that for at least a year, I would say, in Sri Lanka on that schedule. And of course there was like socializing mixed in with all of that and all of these things. And it seemed like I was learning to live a slow life. And it certainly was much more relaxed and much slower than in Melbourne, just by being completely surrounded by nature, by spending so much time at the beach, by being on my own schedule. At least I was on my own relentless schedule instead of the relentless schedule of, you know, whatever other jobs I was working and traffic, and I removed a lot of external stress from my life, but I was still imposing a lot of internal stress on myself. But slowly, just through being in nature more and being surrounded by people that live life more slowly, and I slowly started to uncoil some of this tension that was in my body. Very, very slowly, but I was still always moving fast. All of my practices were fast. Kalari is very fiery, passionate practice. Ashtanga, when I discovered Ashtanga, is also very like disciplined and fiery and strong, which I love. I started doing more yin. Actually, that's the thing. Then I started getting all of this advice from people. I went back to Melbourne one time to help my mum move house, and went to see her acupuncturist for some massages, and he was like, you spend so much time in your head and you're not at all in your body. You need to get more in your body. You need to start breathing properly. You need to breathe properly, deeply into your belly, and start going to yin yoga classes. And then I had this message from a whole bunch of different people. From a holistic chiropractor that I see in Melbourne, said the exact same thing about being in my head and not being in my body and not breathing properly. And I was at this moment getting really into my human design and into my gene keys, which I'm going to start talking about the gene keys a lot, because that was something that drastically transformed my life. And in my gene keys and in my human design, consistently the same message as well. Move more slowly, become much more in tune with the rhythm of nature and the rhythm of greenness and the pace of life of things that are green in nature. Slow down, breathe more, be in your body. And I would read these things and hear these things and I'd be like, yes. I'm doing those. I'm doing them. I think I'm doing them. I might be doing them. Let me think about if I'm doing them. And it was a very rational thing. But slowly, life kept giving me these messages. Just slowly. Remember to breathe. I went to the yin yoga classes. I started to try and relax more, to move more slowly. And then life gave me a bigger nudge, a bigger breadcrumb, which was a very beautiful one. A very, very, very beautiful friend that came into my life and really just told me in no uncertain terms, slow down. You move way too fast, way too fast. And of course, in my mind, I was like, yeah, but why? I didn't say this. Maybe I did say it. But in my mind, I was like, yes, but why would I go slow when I could go fast? I can do so many things. I like going fast. I actually love going fast. I can do so many things. I like going this pace. It's very comfortable in my body. Get to do all of these things. I'm out and about, I'm on my schedule. And I wanted to entertain the idea. Maybe I entertained it for a few seconds. And he did tell me as well. He was like, there are extraordinary things that you will unlock in your life and in your being when you learn to slow down and become much more sensitive to life that's going on around you, all of life that's going on around you. He's like, you cannot imagine what things you will unlock when you discover this. And that intrigued me. That did really intrigue me, enough to contemplate it more. But then, of course, I forgot about it and I was busy. I was doing all of these things, I was on my schedule. There's so many books to read. There's so many things to do. There's places to go. There's people to see. So fast forward a few more months after that. And I left Sri Lanka. I packed up all of my things. It really felt like it was time to move on to the next thing. And so I booked a yoga teacher training in Goa, which was really, really beautiful experience. And I just wanted to deepen my own practice. There were skills that I wanted to learn myself and things that I wanted to explore in my body. And I was starting to realize as well that I had these like very, very, very old, very deeply ingrained patterns of tension in my body. This feeling of being like coiled very tightly. And it was a kind of twisting sensation, I would say. And the more deeply I got into Kalari and Ashtanga and my meditation practice of all of these kind of like inwards things, the more I was sensing that there was patterns of restriction that was kind of stalling my progress in some ways. Or I was kind of like not coming up against a wall, but progress was happening slowly because of these things. And so in Goa, I had kind of set this as an intention. Like, I really would love to meet someone that does massage that is very intuitive and can just help me explore some of these patterns and release them. And I love when I set these intentions and the perfect thing comes into my mind. And they're always the most magical things. Like, I don't want to have to go on Google and find and Google massage therapy. So I was in a cafe. I have a beautiful deck of oracle cards of Kali Oracle. So I was doing that, and the girl sitting next to me was like, oh, can I also pull a card? And so we got chatting and just chatting about all kinds of things. And she was like, oh, I've got this amazing massage guy here. I'll send you his number. So she did, and I messaged him, and I went to see him, and he was extraordinary, like very, 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 very intuitive, very, very potent, very in tune with my body, very open to just listening to what I wanted and exploring that within my body. And then the first massage, I think it was meant to be 90 minutes. It ended up going for 3 hours somehow. And I came out and it was dark and I was like completely disoriented. And we both kind of somehow just went into this vortex of exploring things in my body. So I had weekly massages with him. They were one of the biggest gifts of my life, actually. And each of them went for at least 3 hours. One of them went for even longer than that. And I actually don't know how I'm going to go back to 1 hour massages after this. I haven't had one yet since then. And every time it was just exploring, and I knew I had a lot of tension in my pelvis. So I was exploring these patterns. And he confirmed what I suspected. And he was like, yes, you have obviously very old patterns of tension. He was like, they're all postural and they all have to do with how you walk. And so he gave me some exercises. For the first week, my homework, and I was walking a lot on the beach. I was walking like 15,000, 20,000 steps a day on this beautiful beach in Agonda. And he was like, when you're walking, just practice the way that your foot is striking on the floor. So he gave me that, and I practiced that for the first week. Then I came back and I told him, and he was like, yes, I've seen you walking on the beach. And he was like, you are walking way, 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 way too quickly, way too quickly. And so he was like, your only homework for the next month while you're here is you need to learn to walk slowly. He was like, you're going to hate it. The first 3 days, you're going to hate it. And then you will understand. And because I was really invested into releasing these patterns and just like up-leveling myself, up-leveling my body, learning new skills, exploring new things, I was like, okay, I trust you. I will do it. And he was right. The first 3 days were excruciating. I was just like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. This is so slow. Like, what is the point of walking this slowly? Like, just slowly, slowly, slowly. And it was hilarious, actually. Like, we had that massage, and then he was like, this is your only homework. Like, walk slowly. And I was like, yes, I will. He's like, you'll hate it. And I was like, I understand. I will do it. And then, of course, I immediately forgot. I left the massage place, walked out the front door, and started again, just fell back straight into my old pattern, walking top speed down the street to go back to the yoga thing. And he opened the door of the massage thing and it shouted down the street, and he was like, slow down. And I was like, oh, yes. I literally just said that I was going to do that. And I was like, wow, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. How are you going to slow down? And then so I was very stern with myself. I was like, okay, it's ridiculous. So I walked slowly for the first 3 days. I didn't like it at all for the first 3 days. And then after that, I really started to notice things. I started to realize on the beach that I was and they weren't new sensations. They were not things that I'd never noticed before. But suddenly, instead of just noticing them for like a second or two, I could really luxuriate in these things, of what it felt like to feel the breeze on my skin, of what it looked like, the sunlight sparkling on top of the ocean in that sparkle, which I could watch all day. It's so hypnotizing. What it felt like to feel the texture of the sand moving underneath my foot as my foot was moving on an unstable surface. What did it feel like, that pattern going up my leg, up my hip? Where could I follow it in my body? Like these patterns of like movement in my body. And what did it feel like to smile at people walking past, and to not just be in my phone speaking to people, but actually be present and noticing the people around me, to look at the cows on the beach, to look into their eyes, see what the eyes of the cows look like. What can I feel of the cow? All of these things that I would just notice, like 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, while I'm like walking at this very fast pace, doing other things, listening to other things, optimizing, stacking all these habits. And that was very beautiful. It was a very, very beautiful realization. But the most profound realization happened, maybe it was like towards the end of that week. And it was the first time I rushed. And so I had gone into town to a jewelry shop. I was getting some jewelry custom made. It was late in the evening. I'd done a whole day of training. I'd been for my long, slow beach walk. And I was on the way back, and then I was going back to the yoga place for dinner. And dinner is at a set time at a buffet. I didn't want to miss it. The guy in the jewelry shop was talking my head off. I didn't want to be rude. So I left the shop, and I was in a rush to get back for dinner. I was hungry. I was tired. And so I left the jewelry shop at top speed. And it took me maybe 5 minutes before I caught myself. So I was like walking at top speed. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, this is what it feels like in my body. This is what I've been doing the last decades of my life in my body. And I'd never had a contrast point before. I'd never had anything to compare it to before, because it was just my normal way of walking. And suddenly I had something to compare it to, and it was mind-shattering. I was like, wow, like the tension that I was creating in my body. The way I was like, if my pelvis is like this, the way I was like wrenching my pelvis backwards with each step, propelling myself forwards, like really like hyperextending through my knee to push my pelvis back, like really pulling strongly through my hamstrings, through my glutes on either side. And I was like, no wonder I've got so many hamstring and glute issues from Kalari and from yoga. It's from walking like this everywhere. And the amount of like tension I feel in the back of my knee, like that, the fossa in the back of my knee, the tension in those tendons, it's because I'm wrenching them. I'm wrenching them, like walking like this. And the amount of like tension that I have to hold in my upper body to stabilize the rest of my body while I'm like wrenching my lower body like this. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Wow. And it was just this like lightning bolt moment of clarity. I was like, oh, this is what it means. This is what it means. This is why it's important to move slowly. This is why it's important to move with intention, to walk with intention. And it was just the most groundbreaking, earth-shattering thing. And it was an important realization for me, because it's important in the sense of me being a coach and coaching other people, in that you can tell people what to do. I was getting a lot of advice to slow down from people that I really respect and trust, from sources, books that I really respect and trust. But until I felt it in my own body, what it felt like, what I was creating with that, it didn't mean anything. Of course, it was good advice, but it wasn't groundbreaking. I wasn't going to go so far out of my way to really drastically change a deeply ingrained habit until I felt it like that. And then a lot of things happened from that moment, right? A lot of things shifted for me. There's two things I want to say here, and I just don't want to lose my two trains of thought. I had a big crisis, and which I spent a lot of time on the beach thinking about, of like, I don't want to walk less. I don't want to move less. I don't want to change anything that I'm doing. So how do I consolidate that with moving slower? And then I was like, oh, maybe it's not about doing less per se, but about doing the things that you're doing with much more intention, with much, much, much more attention, with much more focus and clarity, and much more calmness, with much more clarity. And that was a beautiful discovery, to explore that. What if I did do the same amount of walking, but just at a speed that I could keep my groundedness, my attention, my focus, that I could keep this sense of not rushing, the opposite of rushing, this sense of being at a pace where I could pay attention to things and enjoy things, where I could feel my body, where I wasn't wrenching, where I was kind of, to walk without wrenching is to be suspended, right? It's almost like you're in a tension. Instead of like, I was really on this like diagonal force field of like rippling tension, moving through my life at that pace. But when you're walking upright and you're walking slowly, it's a completely different plane of movement. So how can I do the activities that I want to do in this plane of movement with this balance of tension? And that was a beautiful thing to start to explore. And it was also a beautiful permission slip, actually, that I can still have all of these things in my life. I don't have to really change the things that I'm doing. What I do need to do is change my intention behind those things. And then that led to another big discovery, which was just this thing, and this almost like a badge of honor that I had in my life of being an impatient person. And moving through life with impatience and moving through life at a very, very, very fast pace. And I don't know why I prided myself on it so much, actually. I think it was just because I liked doing so much, and that it was just something that I had felt all of my life, this tension, this impatience. And then, of course, this very, very, very conflicting thing of like all of these books that I've been very, very interested in, all kinds of spirituality and personal development books from a very young age. I was reading things like The Power of Now and books like that from when I was like 15 years old, even younger probably. And like living in the now, being present, all of these things, like beautiful, beautiful, beautiful concepts. But I never could really feel them in my body. Again, this thing of like good advice, but what does it feel like in my body? And it wasn't until I realized that this sense of impatience, and I realized this as well when I felt this thing in my body, because it's the same thing of the diagonal force. Impatience is like that. When I am impatient, I'm neither here nor there. I'm not in the present moment, because when you're impatient, you're not here. You're projecting into the future because you're never with exactly what's happening right now. You're impatiently off kilter, off center into the next thing, but you're also not yet into the next thing. So it's almost like living in this limbo land of impatience, which I've lived so much of my life now in hindsight. And it's not until I figured out like, oh, this diagonal force, like this diagonal shearing force that I had through my whole body, through my whole pelvis, through my whole system, my whole being, was also something that extended through time. And it meant that I could never be fully present with anything. I could never be fully present in a conversation because I was always thinking about all of the next things that I had to do. I could never really just enjoy being at the grocery store buying groceries because I was always halfway onto the next thing. I need to reply to these voice notes. Oh, I better do this thing. I got to do that thing. This to-do list, that to-do list. And it wasn't until I slowed down enough to feel this in my body and to take this diagonal line and to straighten it and have it be a force coming out of the top of my head into the sky and out of my base of my spine into the center of the earth. And this was a visualization that I was doing when I was walking very slowly. But to feel suspended in this almost timelessness where there wasn't a rush anymore. And there wasn't a need for impatience anymore because there wasn't a rush. And I could finally, maybe for the first time in my life, feel what it felt like to just be suspended in the present moment, in my own body. And it's almost like this tension upwards and downwards creates a funnel for me to drop in, out of my mind and into my body. Out of this like to-do list and this and that, and I've got to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do this. And I'm running out of time. There's not enough time. What am I going to do? I need to do this. How am I going to fit everything in? I better listen to this podcast. There's so many books to read. I've got to talk to this person. There's so many things to do. This relentless thing in my mind. And I could finally get off this diagonal plane that was completely shearing my head off my body and keeping me trapped up here. And let me find a pathway inside of my body where I could finally just breathe. Because when we're impatient, what is that other than just a sense that everything is not right and we're escaping? We're escaping forwards. We're shifting forwards out of this moment because this moment's not good enough. There's 1,000 other things we have to do. But not this one right here. This one's not deserving of our full attention because there's many other things. And impatience in my body feels like constriction. It's like squeezing everything so tight, like squeezing a tube of toothpaste really tight. And then it all gets stuck up here at the nozzle. And then you're breathing just from here. So shallow. And everything feels like, ugh. Do you know what I mean? Like a spring, like this tightly coiled spring. And somehow when I found this balance and walking slow, because I had to feel that in my body to walk slowly, because you have to shift your center of gravity. My center of gravity was completely off because I was living on this diagonal. And once I shifted it to the center, I found a pathway to come back in here, to this acceptance and love of what it feels like just to be in this moment, looking at the sparkles on the ocean, in this greenness of nature, the pace of nature, which I finally have just discovered, and it's an ongoing discovery that I was reading about so much. And to drop in to my body, and everybody talks about embodiment. I was doing 1,000 embodiment practices, but I wasn't in there, because I was doing my embodiment practices with half of my mind thinking about the next thing I had to do, and the other jobs that I have to do, and all of these other things, and my schedule. So I could talk about this for much longer, actually, but I'm going to leave it here for now and explore it more deeply maybe in another episode. But this was my groundbreaking, earth-shattering discovery of walking slowly. I invite you to try it. And I give you the same advice that my massage therapist gave to me. Give it 3 days. You might hate it for 3 days, especially if you're somebody that prides themselves on their very, very fast action pace of life like I did. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert yet. I think I'm barely scratching the surface of this thing. But the more I discover, the more extraordinary life gets. The more beautiful everything is. The more I get to truly just luxuriate and relax into this moment, this present moment. This being in the now that everyone talks about. Be in the now, be in the now, be in the now. Find your center of gravity and drop in. Breathe into your belly so deeply. That's where you can find the antidote to impatience. That's where you can find maybe a slower pace of life. And the crazy thing is, I thought it would be boring. I thought it would be dull. I thought it would be completely pointless. But it's so beautiful. And the more I slow down, the more richness everything has. All of my conversations, everything I do in my life. It's the most extraordinary discovery. I invite you to try it for yourself. Please, if you do, report back and tell me what you discover. If you go for a walk this afternoon, do it at half the pace. Just see what happens. You have no idea what magical things are waiting for you when you learn the art of slowing down. I'm excited for us. Sending you all my love.